Thursday, February 16th, 2017. I'm your host, Sarah Mantle. We have a great show in store for you today. We're going to start off the program with an interview with Town Manager Mark Ells. He's going to shed some light on a plan to build a carbon treatment system at the Marr well field. Then we'll find out what's on the agenda for tonight's Town Council meeting with Town Council President Eric Steinhelber. All of that on this episode of Barnstable Today. But first, let's take a look at today's top headlines. School officials will now be able to administer Narcan should a student overdose while in school. It's one of the updates to the district's policy on administering medicines to students. School Committee Chair Margot Weber says it's a policy many Cape districts have already adopted.
I kind of Googled today just to see what the status was with other districts, and the first article that came up was from October 2015. And at that point, Mashpee was discussing it, Sandwich and Falmouth had already adopted it. School resource officers at DY have Narcan, and other local school districts are training nurses or in discussions.
And the school committee voted to approve those changes to administering medicines to students policy. Hyannis West Elementary students read dream speeches inspired by the life of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. during this week's school committee meeting. The speeches were heartfelt and made a huge impact on us here at Channel 18. Here's 9-year-old Nicholas Barcel reading his speech.
Don't use your fist, use your words. Stop war by Nicholas Barcel. I am Nicholas P.O. Barcel and I am 9 years old. I am a bold, brave, intelligent young man who will stop wars and violence using words. Don't use your fist, use your words. Stop war. I want peace. I want my dad. I want to stop wars. My dad is not a pair of boots, so when you hear leaders talking about putting boots on the ground, remember whose feet are in those boots. Dads like mine, sons like yours, moms like yours, grandmas and grandpas like yours are in those boots. I don't want people to go to very bad wars with guns and bombs. What I do want is for them to use the words, not guns. Love, not bombs. Heart, not fist. Don't use your fist, use your word. Stop war. Listen, I know I am only 9 years old, but I can still make a difference. I want to call the president, our commander-in-chief, and the top generals and have a meeting about our defense. I will say, no boots on the ground. Our enemies will injure our troops. Instead of risking lives, let's use our words and hearts, not guns, bombs, nukes, and bombers. A lot of people want peace, not all the guns shooting. Dr. King said, love is the only force capable of transforming an enemy into a friend. Sooner or later, all the people of the world will have to discover a way to live together. Don't use your fist, use your words. Stop war.
Wow, 9 years old. Amazing. That's just one of the many beautifully written speeches by Hyannis West Elementary students. You can see all of the speeches by visiting the town's website or the Barnstable Channel 18 Facebook page. February is National Children's Dental Health Month, and Cape Cod Community College is celebrating with free exams and cleanings. Cleanings will be provided by dental hygiene students and will be supervised by licensed hygienists and dentists. 3 clinic days are scheduled this month, one Tuesday, February 21st, one Wednesday, February 22nd, and one Thursday, February 23rd. Appointments must be made in advance and are for kids ages 3 through 17. It's time to fill out the town's annual census form. Forms were mailed this week. When you receive your census form, you can make any changes necessary and send it back or drop it off in the town clerk's office. Even if there are no changes, you still need to sign the form and send it back. This will make voting easier for you and keep you up to date in the voter registration system. The census form must be completed by all residents residing in the town of Barnstable. Up next, we're going to chat with Town Manager Mark Ells. And joining me now to talk more about some water issues here in the town of Barnstable, I have with me Town Manager Mark Els. Thank you so much for sitting down with me today. I want to talk about some things that are coming up and some things that town officials are planning for. One of the things that is on the town council agenda is a proposal for, I think, a $6.5 million water filtration system at the Marwell. Tell me why this is so important and why this is being proposed right now.
Well, if we back up a couple of steps, the change in the requirements relevant to this particular, chemical that's in our water, this PFAS, that occurred a couple of years ago, and then the advisory standard dropped last May. EPA dropped the advisory standard last May, has triggered us to put in place filtration at our Mary Dunn wells and now at our Mar wells, so that we remain compliant with these standards. Now, these advisory standards aren't drinking water standards, which to the average person, they're not going to necessarily recognize the difference. But this is really saying over a lifetime, if you ingest this, we're concerned for certain groups of people. Bottom line, though, is nobody wants anything in their water. So we're going forward to be compliant with the advisory standard and to make sure that we continue to have a high quality of water.
And this really, I mean, I think people should understand too that this isn't, we are not the only community that's dealing with this issue, because it was a change in EPA regulation. So communities across the country are struggling with the same thing to make sure they now fall in line with these new requirements.
Yes, and we are compliant. So the water that we have and will continue to put into our system will remain compliant. This cost that you're describing is part of remaining compliant, especially longer term. And so we need to put filters on the Mar wells for PFAS and other contaminants that are up gradient to make sure that whatever the standards are, this isn't an issue for us in the future. Now, in a sense, this is offset because for the last year we have an interconnect with Yarmouth, and Yarmouth has been a great partner with us. We've been a good customer of theirs, maybe I should say, and we'll be buying water so that we can make sure that we don't have any risk of exceeding any of these advisory standards. But that isn't sustainable long term. We've had to increase an operating budget for our water supply division by $1.2 million a year. By putting these filtration systems on the existing wells, there's 4 Mary Dunn wells, 3 of them have filtration, and then there's 3 Mar wells. That will allow us to utilize those with no detection. There isn't a issue relevant because it's being removed. This contamination would be removed from the groundwater, which ultimately becomes our drinking water. And so we're moving forward with that. And so that's what this request is. We won't have to incur the purchase of water from Yarmouth any longer. And so when we begin to look at this from, okay, how does it impact our rates, we're actually going to be able to manage better by not having to spend all that money buying water from another community. We'll be paying the loans, basically, on the installation of this. But in tandem with this, we're also, and this was something that we had gone forward to town council. We had received authorization to be able to design and to move forward to construct, and now we're here at construct. So we want to get this built so that we can shift from purchasing water from another community to continuing to utilize the wells that we have. In tandem with this, or parallel with this, we're also looking for alternative wells for the future so that we can hopefully relocate some wells or just add additional wells. It's very difficult to decommission a public drinking water well. I don't know that we've done it in the town of Barnstable. I have to find examples statewide that it's been done. So I think what you'll see happen is you'll see a shift if we find wells that are both of quantity and quality outside of the areas where we currently have these concerns. You'll see a shift. Some of the water withdrawal to those locations, and the most highlighted one recently is our discussions with the state about the 250 acres that's immediately to the northeast of us. It's a Fish and Wildlife property, and we are continuing to discuss that. But it's not limited to that. We're working with the county over at the county farm as a potential site. We're looking at other locations, certainly in district and beyond. To try to really come up with, okay, how are we going to manage this best? Because the challenge here is that up gradient of our water supply are uses, commercial uses, airports, residents, and given the detection limits today of things that end up in our groundwater, certainly like a point source, meaning a specific site that has an issue, is what we're used to managing. But given where these thresholds are going, it could be a very trace amount. I've said this to you before, but it used to be thousands, and then it went to parts per million, and then it went to parts per billion.
Wow.
The most recent standard is 0.07 parts per trillion. Now, when I first got into this, you couldn't even detect down to that.
Right.
So we're talking about very minute amounts of whatever the contaminants may be. In this case, it's this PFAS, which is typically found in things like firefighting foam. But it becomes a real challenge. And when you have up-gradient uses of a down-gradient water supply, we need to keep a close eye on this. One of the reasons back in 2005 that the system was purchased from the private sector was to ensure long-term good quality and quantity, and to upgrade the infrastructure that was 100 years old in some cases and wasn't working the way it should have been. And so that's what we've been trying to do. This is when standards change, our plan has to change a little bit to make sure that we keep pumping the quantity and the quality that our residents and businesses and visitors expect, and that's what we're doing.
Yes, so important. I think water is nothing to mess around with, and thank you so much for all of your work to make sure that we have pristine water. We appreciate it. Very important. You did have a rate hearing. I want to talk briefly about that this week. Some rates in the water system will be going up or may be going up. You're evaluating those increases. Tell me a little bit about those increases.
Sure. We have 2 rate hearings a year. It's actually, if you're interested and you follow our budgeting process and you go to the back of our budgeting books, there's a budget schedule, and they're right in there. So if you're wondering when they are, you can see it. This is our fiscal year rate hearing. We had our calendar year rate hearing back in November. Now we're having fiscal year. So calendar year obviously begins, January 1. Fiscal year begins July 1. So these are rates that will change. We had 3 departments make proposals for different areas total. Within Public Works, there was a solid waste proposal. It wasn't to the sticker. The sticker will remain the same. It was to the per visit rate. In water supply, it was a percentage across the board. In community services, it was some of the fees for ice time at the Youth and Community Center. And in regulatory services, it was relevant to a usage fee that you pay when you come in to try to have an event on town property. There was also a parking fee associated with when you're here having an event and you want to park, but you need to have some sort of sticker or some sort of authorization to park in certain places, the ability to say, okay, well, you can buy it for 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day, and here's where you will park. So those are the proposals, and the way it works is we hold the hearing. The respective staff presents the justification, the rationale behind the request. And then I ask questions, the public is invited to ask questions, then I close the hearing, Now where we are is I keep it open. I try to keep things open for at least 30 days because not everybody can make the hearing, and I want to hear from our public. I want to.
So if someone wanted to weigh in and say, okay, I couldn't make the hearing, how would you prefer that communication?
Any way. They can call me, they can email me, they can send me a letter, they can, whatever they want to do. I want to keep it open. I want to at least have one town council meeting, so during town manager's communication, I'm able to state it before our town council, because certainly, these are important issues. These are the business of the town, and I want to give our residents and our leadership the opportunity to ask questions, to ask additional information. If we need workshops, hold workshops. So then when we get to the end, you make your decision, everybody understands it, and that's that. We move on. So
wonderful. Glad to hear that that's still available for residents who may want to weigh in on those the rate fee hearing. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Our guest today, of course, Town Manager Mark Els. Town Council meets tonight. We get a look at what's on the agenda during our interview with Town Council President Eric Steinhelber. Town Council meets tonight to find out what's on the agenda. We have with us Town Council President Eric Steinhelber. Eric, thank you so much for joining us. Not too big of an agenda this week. Let's go ahead and start with some old business. There is a $95,000 appropriation order. That's to fund costs with notice of responsibility from the EPA. This is in relation to some cleanup issues that we had to deal with. Is that correct?
Sure, and thanks for having me this morning, Sarah. This is tied to the notice of responsibility that was issued by the state as a party of potential responsibility to the airport, dealing with the PFAS that was found in the Mar wells. Similar thing was issued to Barnstable County for the Mary Dunn wells, which is pretty clear is a direct result of the fire academy, which is, if you think of groundwater kind of going downhill, you have the fire academy, then downhill from that to the Mary Dunn wells, and downhill from that to the airport, downhill from that is the Mar wells. So groundwater kind of tracks that way. The Mar wells is a little bit more of a confusing situation. Could be airport, could be fire academy, so this will help kind of get through that situation at the Mar wells.
And of course, that actually there will be a public hearing on that item and a roll call vote. The next item on the agenda is a $138,000 appropriation order, and this is for a slurry seal for an airport runway. Is that right?
Yep, it's finishing up the project kind of behind the main terminal for the jet parking. Obviously, we got bigger jets coming in with JetBlue now. We hope to have more of those in the future. So this is solidifying that runway, and the nice thing about this is once the work's done, we actually get a 95% reimbursement from FAA and the State Department of Transportation.
Wonderful. That's always nice. Love the rebates there.
Right.
And then, of course, a Massachusetts grant in the amount of $5,000 from the Massachusetts Executive Office of Administration and Finance. This is for a project supporting housing here in the town of Barnstable. What will this be used for?
Yeah, specifically this grant money is used for continued public outreach, talking to different folks in town, groups in town, as we kind of work through what our housing needs are, what are some of the potential opportunities we have. So this grant money will go to help continue that outreach to the public.
And then, of course, the big ticket item that's in for a first reading, not yet a public hearing. Of course, this item will be referred to a public hearing at the next town council meeting. I believe that's March 2nd.
Correct.
But we do want to talk about this a little bit because it is a very large ticket item. It's a $6.5 million project to deal with some of our water issues and to build a carbon treatment system at the Mar well field, similar to what we have at the blanking on the
Mary
name.
Dunn.
Thank you, Mary Dunn.
Right.
Thank you, Mary Dunn well field.
It is a big issue ongoing. The Mary Dunn wells have the filters on them, and just to be clear for folks in town, there's no issue with the drinking water at all, so not anything to be worried about. PFAS was found in the Mary Dunn wells way back. The federal EPA had lowered the acceptable amount, so we're talking about parts per trillion. But we took care of the issue at the Mary Dunn wells by putting the filters on. Again, that's tied to the PFAS that was used at the Fire Training Academy, which is in fire foam. It's a chemical that's in fire suppression foam. So we're working with the county to kind of work out a financial arrangement there to kind of ease the burden on the Mary Dunn wells. But the Mar wells, what we've done is basically we're not using those that much, and we've contracted with the town of Yarmouth to bring water in on that end of town, but it's expensive. So we're going to move forward with putting the same type of filters on the Mar wells, so you don't have to continue, with the contract with Yarmouth.
Yeah, it's sort of like, when do you pay the money? Do you pay it now and try and save some of that cost in the future? So it seems like a pretty big ticket item, but at the same time, really preventing some further expenses that could carry on for some time. Yeah,
drinking water is of utmost importance, obviously. So we'll do, whatever we need to do to deal with these issues, and it'll be an ongoing situation with the county and other entities as we kind of work through it and get everything squared away.
Then I see an item here, Eric, on the agenda. It is dealing with the Gateway Medical District again. This may be actually just sent back to the planning board. Is that right? Can you tell me a little bit about the goal of this zoning change and what the process will be with this?
Sure. We had this on the agenda a little ways back, but the kind of proponents of this decided to change the language a little bit. So we took it off the agenda, sent it back for a rewrite. So now it's coming back to us, and we're going to refer it to the planning board. They'll have their hearing on it, and then they'll refer it back to the town council. But the background on this is there's a lot of landlords with units in this zone, and it's been the way it's zoned now. The definition of the zone is kind of restrictive of who they can have come in there. So they have high vacancies. So what this is doing is maintaining the medical office opportunity, but opening up to some other types of businesses. So hopefully they'll have an easier time of renting these vacant units, which is good for everybody.
Yeah, and I think some of the items that will be included now, maybe that weren't in the past, are business and professional offices, banks, restaurants, retail uses as well, and even multifamily housing. So it really could open up the area a little bit more.
Much wider net, which is good for, like I said, getting these places rented, which we want. We want thriving businesses and all these commercial units. It's good for everybody.
Absolutely, and of course, housing as well is such an issue. So anything else that you'll be dealing with this week's town council meeting?
The only other thing we have on the new business, acceptance of a gift of 2 land parcels out near Communication Way and South Flint Rock Road, and this is basically satisfying a Cape Cod Commission mitigation with the development of the 55-plus senior housing that's going into Independence Park. So these 2 parcels will be, put in conservation for perpetuity, and so we'll be acting on that as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, giving us all the information we need before tonight's town council meeting. We really appreciate it. And of course, look forward to chatting with you again in a couple weeks.
Sounds good, Sarah. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Talk to you soon.
Right. Bye-bye.
Of course, our guest today, Town Council President Eric Steinhelber. Now let's find out what's happening around town in today's community calendar. The Barnstable High School Prom Celebration Committee is raising money to support the annual After Prom event. The committee is hosting a night of fun with Barnstable's Jim Ruberti as MC. The event will be at the Cape Cod Resort March 11th from 7 to 10. Food will be provided, and there will be a live and silent auction as well as raffle prizes. For ticket information, the Barnstable High School you can visit the Barnstable High School Prom Celebration Facebook page. You can catch some fun improv at the Geyer Barn every Friday night. The New Classics Company puts on a great show that requires some really fun interactions with the audience. The show begins every Friday night at 7:30 at the Geyer Barn. The event is free to attend, although they do accept donations. The only meeting today is, of course, Town Council. Town Council meets at 7 tonight in the Town Hall hearing room. Well, thanks for joining us today. We're going to be back tomorrow with another great show in store for you. Tomorrow, we will find out what's happening at the Cotuit Library. We're going to meet and talk with Library Director Antonia Stevens. We'll also chat with HYCC General Manager Joe Izzo, find out what's happening over there at the Hyannis Youth and Community Center, and so much more. For Barnstable Today, I'm Sarah Mannel.